I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on a swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at dynasty_dadff. Obviously rocking my green just like John. You know, it's this little St. Patrick's Day late night event here. Super excited to introduce our guest. But before we do that, I'm going to introduce my doppelganger here. You know, he's wearing the exact same outfit, almost got the headphones going. John, it's been a while. How you been?
Good, Mike. And happy St. Patty's Day to everybody. Yeah, feeling lucky tonight. Luck of the Irish. You know, we got March Madness going, free agency. Of course, everyone knows I have rookie fever. But most importantly, back on the Smash Accept pod. Can't wait for this one. A lot of people throwing around takes right now, especially during free agency, Mike. But look, on Smash Accept, we only bring the best. Have a little Irish proverb on this topic here. It says, "He is bad that will not take advice, but he is 1,000 times worse that takes every advice." So what I'm thinking here is listen to the Irish and listen to this pod with the guests we have tonight, and you'll be good.
I love it. You know, when we're backstage here and we were talking a little bit, it felt like you and I were, you know, it was like that scene where you come into Wedding Crashers where they're introducing themselves and I'm like, yo, I'm Seamus O'Toole.
Bobby O'Shea.
Let's get drunk. We're going to get drunk on some fantasy football information, though. Not quite that same way. Next, we were just talking about free agents about 45 minutes ago. We just released that podcast. You know, so much going on. Welcome to the show again. And how's it going?
Yeah, it's great. It's good to see John again. It's been a while since I've seen his ugly mug. So super excited to have him back. And, I'm excited to talk with Angelo because I'm still fairly new to the film game. I'm more of a numbers guy, as you guys know. But just to pick his brain and talk about these rookies.
Oh, you ruined the intro, man. I was like super excited.
Oh God, I don't need all that.
The suspense is gone. You know, I had this drum roll, everything going on here.
Well, you're gonna put it in the title of the podcast, so spoiler alert.
Well, that was because we got fantastic guests on. You know, one of the best minds when it comes to rookie evaluations. And I talked to him first when I was on the Dynasty Refinery, and just loved the threads that he put out on Twitter and everything that he's been able to do, and the things that he's doing in the website now just blow my mind. We have Angelo from Angelo Analysis. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. We talked a little bit about before the podcast. I'm a Bears fan, so Russell Wilson versus Andy Dalton. So I guess I'm not so great in that capacity. But man, thank you for having me on. I know we've been kind of chopping it up for a little while, so I'm glad if I made it happen.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. You know, that scenario is like you're going to ask when you're in high school and you're going to ask the 10 to a prom, right? and then all of a sudden it gets swapped out and you get a 4. You know, like no offense on that, but it's like the Andy Dalton signing, it's got to be such a letdown because you were here in Deshaun Watson, you were here in Russell Wilson, so many different scenarios, and Chicago's just needed a quarterback for so long.
Yeah, man. It's tough.
Yeah, having two guys on from Chicago. You know, what was St. Patrick's like? You know, we're in St. Patrick's Day. What was it like? Any kind of experience today?
Man, I've had none. I've gone to work and ate some dinner and came home. But I know the river's green, so that's a big Chicago tradition. So that's always fun to see. But it's always, it's different now with COVID. Obviously, it's not as many people out and about. Obviously St. Patrick's Day around here is a big celebration. So it's been a little different, honestly, a little quieter than past years, which is not a bad thing. But yeah, it's a little quieter. That's something I've definitely noticed, and especially now at nighttime.
Yeah, we're excited for this year. Like last year, we're talking about fantasy football, and it's like, is there going to be a season? What is COVID's implication? What's going to happen? Now, obviously, we know we have a season. Things are starting to open up a little bit more. But Angelo, this year more than ever, we're going to have to trust our tape because the combine's not there. We get the pro days, but we all know what, those numbers can get skewed here and there. I mean, guys, what do you see as the major difference from 2020 offseason, and we're getting our rookie analysis into 2021 and how that looks? We'll start with you, Angelo.
Oh man, I think the biggest thing is we're going to kind of overrate some of these guys because of the pro days a bit. And that's going to be tough because obviously we don't have a common. We don't have basically concrete balance metrics that we can kind of go off of, especially the explosive testing, like 40, like the short shuttle, broad jump, vertical jump. So it's all not on the same day at the same time. So that's the toughest thing is when we're evaluating these guys, we have to look more so at what they do on the field, how they act as movers, how they are as problem solvers, and then kind of articulate that information and be like, okay, now I have to see how can I combine this and make fantasy football decisions. And that's going to be the hardest part is kind of like weeding through like all that information and finding things that are, that are important to us as, like fantasy football managers. And, we're trying to get shares of these guys. So like who should we take where is going to be really important this year than, like past years, it was a lot easier. So it's going to be difficult, but I mean, it's definitely a welcome challenge. It's going to be fun.
I think one of the key words you said there is movers, and based off of why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about what you do, as far as over there on the website? I mean, everyone does tape analysis and everyone does things, but you take it from a different angle because of what your background is.
Yeah, man, for sure. So my career is in sport and human performance. So I'm really fortunate in my own career to be really hands-on with athletes and practitioners alike. So it's just a blessing to see high-level athletes move up close and what that's really like. And help them solve problems. I mean, whether it's, helping someone, for like a pro day combine type thing, or just like talking to like a coach and trying to figure out what periodization looks like for a high school program, things of that nature. So for me, I use a lot of the same practices in my career that I do when I evaluate prospects in terms of like slowing down film, taking still shots, like analyzing different aspects of just human locomotion. And so I'm a total complete nerd with all of this, and you can probably see that by the website. So that's what a lot of it's like on the website as well. So like the website essentially is me breaking all that stuff down in terms of player evaluation and just kind of blending like human locomotion and decision making. And, it's just understanding that these guys are playing against extremely athletic, intuitive, intelligent human beings. Like what qualities do these guys have on the field of play that can separate them from other elite prospects in their own class? So it's definitely been a ton of fun, creating it, and working with it and learning and failing and growing. So it's, every day is a new journey with this. So I'm really excited and I'm pretty blessed to have it.
Well, it's been nice. Even, I mean, you and I have been talking for a couple of years and just watching your progress and how that's, evolved, every year it just keeps getting better and better. Right. John and Mung, like I said, we were so excited last year, but it was anticipation. Like, is there going to be football? Isn't there? I mean, we know there's football now. What is your difference right now going into this offseason as opposed to the rest? I mean, I'm saying offseason, but I've already done 3 startups because I got a fever,
That's right. Yeah. I mean, there really is no off season for us. Right. But, for me, the difference, I'm definitely depending on guys like Angelo a lot more and grinding the film, the guys that really do break it down. And the thing about it is we have a much smaller sample size for a lot of these players here. We had some guys coming off injuries. We had shortened seasons. We had some opt-outs on some of the big players too. And so you really got to make sure that on the field film that we did have on some of those players that we really get down into it and analyze it and make sure we understand, like Angelo said, where to rank these guys, where to put them based on what we're seeing on the field. So that's the biggest change for me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you got guys like, Jamar Chase sat out, or guys that got injured,
right,
and people that chose because of COVID not to
right,
perform. So yeah, that's a great take. Mung, what about you? What's one thing that's really changed for you over this past year?
Yeah, and whenever we look at the rookies, post NFL draft, we always look at where the NFL took them, right? Because that gives us some sense of how the team looks at him, how the coach, looks at him and values him, and that could lead to opportunity. And then draft capital also determines a lot of times, just how high the ceiling is because we're looking at how, early these teams reached. But the NFL draft's a crapshoot to begin with, but now with no combine, I'm also hesitant to really kind of elevate a rookie prospect because of draft capital this year more than any other, because some of these teams are going to be flying blind as well.
Yeah. And I think this time of year, even more so, is like we've talked about the combine sometimes double counting, like a player we know is going to test out really well for speed, and then they run a good 40 and we bump them up another notch. Mung, let's start out with the running backs. And let's talk about some of the boxes you're looking to check. Like some of the historical numbers we're looking for. What are you looking for in running backs? When you break down film, what are some things that we really want to make sure that our running backs, the boxes that they're checking before our rookie drafts?
Yeah, for me, I mean, one of the big things I look at is burst because, again, the 40 isn't some tell all, but at the same time, I want my running backs to be able to get enough acceleration in that short area where they can reach that second level of open field, even if they're not breaking, a 40, 50-yard touchdown. But I want those chunk plays because that's where a lot of that fantasy production comes from. And then also, for me, more and more in this day and age, how do they match up as receivers? Can they run routes to some extent? How are their hands and all that? For me, I'm more of an amateur film analyst, so I can't tell as well in terms of the footwork and the vision and that stuff. And that's where I rely on guys like Angelo.
And that's why we're going to turn it right over to him. What are some things that you're looking for? And last year's running back class was historical. Right. I mean, it was phenomenal. There's some guys in this class that stand out, but why don't you start out before we get into them? Talk a little bit about what you're trying to find on tape. I mean, as far as based off of what your profession is and things like that. Are you looking a little bit differently? Break it down a little bit for us.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a little bit different, especially, with my background as an athlete and, and as a practitioner. So for me, a lot of it's about how does the player move? Like, how do they move in space? How do they move in a short area? How do they move through contact? How do they do, at the second level? How do they do in different types of engagements? Like, is it a singular engagement? Is a multifaceted engagement? So there's so many different types of things that I look for on the field of play. And you mentioned the word burst. So like when we're talking about like athletes and early acceleration and how they're performing, we have to take into account these are thinking, feeling human beings that are, trying to chase them. So it's not so much in a straight line, but how do they change direction? Like how quickly and efficiently do that? But I guess the biggest thing for me, especially at the running back position, is how well do they navigate and take contact? They're getting contacted on nearly every play, whether they are as a receiver, whether they're in pass protection, or they're, handing the ball like a normal handoff. So how do they navigate contact? Are they good through contact? Are they good at evading contact? And so it's either evade or engage, really. So running back on any given play is either evading contact or engaging in contact. So looking at that type of thing and looking at guys like, let's say, Travis Etienne, for example, who isn't great through contact, has a lot of trouble navigating contact, but he has extremely unique physical tools as an accelerator that in the right offense, he's going to absolutely explode. So it's really unique breaking that type of stuff down and like going frame by frame and seeing how these guys really move and how different they really are as athletes. But I think that's the biggest thing for me, especially at the running back position, is, seeing, how they take contact and what that looks like, from athlete to athlete, from running back to running back.
And John, we know draft capital means so much when it comes to these running backs, but why don't you take me through your process of really trying to figure out when we get to that rookie draft, because you are rookie fever, John, maybe Bobby O'Shea tonight. What are you looking for in your running backs?
Yeah, I mean, I'd start by saying that, first of all, for me, talent is always the most important thing. Talent over landing spot, like 10 times out of 10. And we had some tough lessons about this last year. In fact, we talked about a couple of them on the pod. But look, draft capital is meaningful. If you get selected in the first round, especially these days, that's a pretty big deal. And it means that the team's investing more in that particular player and they're likely to stick with them longer. And it does validate how the NFL and certainly that specific team feels about him. So it is worth a lot. And for me, the running backs that I'm especially paying close attention to on draft capital are rounds 1 through 3. After that, what we've seen kind of historically is there's a pretty sharp drop off. But you're looking at day 1, day 2, especially on draft capital. And I'm really curious for this particular draft class because we're all talking about the big 3. And then after that, are we going to see anyone else sneak in there? let's say in those first 3 rounds. And so that's something I'm keeping a close eye on. And, you do kind of maybe move the rankings around a little bit, especially tiebreakers on draft capital for me, when you're not quite sure on the film or you have a limited set of film or whatever it may be. So that's kind of how I approach it.
So speaking of the big three, I mean, Angelo, there's one of them that jumps out, and I know he's a guy that, looking at your website, is someone that flashes. I mean, and
Right.
we had Matthew Hicks on, and he had him as, this year's clear RB1, but he said he, has him in the top 3 if you compare the 2 classes this year and last year, and had him right up there with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, how good is Najee Harris, and what have you seen?
I mean, man, he's a bull in ballerina slippers, man. He's a remarkable athlete with the things he can do movement-wise at 230 plus pounds. I mean, he's a top shelf receiver in this class and throughout most classes, in my opinion. Extremely natural hands, has the capability to line up anywhere on the field. If you want to see, kind of a snippet of his receiving capabilities, toss on the SEC title game against Florida. He's an absolutely phenomenal athlete in space too, because he can do so much. He's a 230 pounder who doesn't play like a 230 pounder, if that makes sense. As a Chicago Bears fan, he moves a little bit like Matt Forte. And Matt Forte is probably one of the most underrated running backs this past decade, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's got that throwback a little bit. Like, I saw a little bit of Steven Jackson in his game.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that's exciting when you start throwing around names like that. I mean, some of our younger listeners are like, well, let's be honest, we don't have younger listeners because we're a bunch of dads. But, they're like, Matt Forte, they only think about the later part of their years. But, I mean, there was an 8-year stretch where that guy was.
No, he was the tank, man. He's awesome.
But sorry, I didn't mean to
No.
You were going on it. Keep going, man.
No, for sure. I just think, a guy like Harris, like, those guys don't come around very often with the skill set as a mover and as a receiver at 230 plus pounds. So, like, for me, I think it's Najee Harris and the rest of the class. I think we have a group of running backs this year. I think it's 3 and then the rest, really. But there's a lot of intriguing guys. But for me, a guy like Harris with his skill set, just the overarching nature of it, he's clear cut for me, number 1. But I think he's probably going to he might see the highest draft capital too. I mean, that's what I think. I think he goes 18 to Miami. I think that's kind of where I'm pegged right now. But I just love his game, man. And as you can see on the site, I mean, some of the things that he can do, the type of control he can have and the dexterity at that size, it's just special from a locomotive standpoint.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, in a 1 quarterback league, obviously Najee Harris is the 101. I'm seeing a lot of, like, the last CBS mock I saw had Travis Etienne going to the Bucks at 32. Now, I mean, I have Etienne as my 2. Some people have Javonte Williams. But talk to me a little bit about, you talked a little bit about Etienne.
Yeah.
I mean, his draft capital, if he came out last year, was much higher than where it is now, sure. And he didn't do a lot to really detract that. But it's just a matter of, like, he's fallen where I'm seeing him in super flex leagues going like 108, 109, and really just falling down based off of not a super flashy season.
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, his shining quality is, his impact and early acceleration, right? I mean, I think he's the best accelerator at the position since Chris Johnson, for being honest. I think that is a very, very, that's a high mark for him. That's his shining quality, and everything else really depends on that. And that's the thing with him. He doesn't offer much in creating plays before the line of scrimmage or creating space. He struggles to orient and navigate contact types, which, if you watch him play, he turns through contact, right? It's kind of always like a pirouette almost when he gets hit. And if he doesn't spin through those engagements, it leaves him open to some pretty big shots, and some punishment. It's also just not as efficient as, using his accelerative capabilities as power in a sense. But I liked his improvement as a receiver. I think that's the biggest thing that I saw, I guess, from 2019 to 2020 was how much he improved in that facet. I think he's still about league average in terms of the capabilities he displays there. He's not Najee Harris or Kenneth Gainwell in terms of where he can position the line, but he's good enough to make an impact in the screen game or be a viable check down option. I have him on AGS, the Ascension grading system that's on Angelo Analysis that I created this year. He's the 2nd ranked running back. Film wise, I think he came out 5th. So 4th or 5th. So AGS is comprised of film and analytics. So it's 70% film, 30% analytics. So his film score was pretty mediocre. He actually scored right around where Miles Sanders scored, which is interesting because those two to me are very similar style players. but his analytics was fantastic. And Mug, you can probably attest to this too. Like he's analytically has the best profile in the whole class, and that's fact. Like he absolutely does. But for me, there's a lot of things that have to go right with Etienne in order for him to be, the high-end fantasy producer that many think he will. He needs a wide zone scheme, man. He needs San Francisco, or he needs the New York Jets. He needs an offensive mind that's going to be patient with him and be able to kind of ride the waves that he'll probably provide as a player. But all in all, man, he's super high ceiling prospect, but the floor is, I think, a little lower than some admit.
Yeah, and I think landing spot, like you said, is going to be huge. I mean, the way he bursts through a hole and flies. I mean, you're right. That acceleration. I think we talked about him last year when you were on my other podcast. We talked about that. He's got that home run speed once he hits through there. There's starting to be a little bit more of a blending of, a couple months back, it was Harris and Etienne. Now it feels like Harris has separated him completely. And Javonte Williams is coming close to Etienne, especially on Twitter. Mung and I was going to call you Bobby O'Shea. John, talk to me about those two guys a little bit and where you have them in your ranking.
Yeah, I was actually, one of my questions for Angelo was going to be style-wise, Etienne and Williams are very different, right? Because Williams kind of, instead of, to use the word you said, pirouetting through contact, he just, bam, he goes right through the tackler. And I mean, again, in terms of that approach, I think that opens himself up to injury potentially. But at the same time, I feel like he's built more thicker. I don't know if that even makes sense. And this is purely from just kind of watching him play, not even weight-wise. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you have a preference on that style? And I know you said, the Jets would be a great fit with Matt LaFleur for Etienne. Where do you think would be great for Javonte Williams?
Oh, man, that's a great question, brother. I mean, I think for me, the Falcons with Arthur Smith is kind of my number one spot for him. It's interesting because, besides Harris, all these guys are pretty landing spot dependent in terms of schematically how they kind of fit, especially right now in the NFL. I mean, they're going to grow into being a more diverse players. But a guy like Harris can fit into all 32 teams, and he's going to be fine, right? He can run zone, he can run gap, he can run power. Like he can run a ton of different variations and schematically be a pretty solid fit. But a guy like Williams, and we talked about stylistically, like how he's so much different, polar opposite to a guy like Etienne. Does that open up for more punishment? It depends, man. I mean, the running back, you're looking for his contract. That's it, right? Anything after that, just gravy. I mean, I think a guy like Williams, he's going to get beat up when it comes over time, but he brings it. Like my man Williams, Javonte Williams brings it. He's a really raw, young prospect. He has a really high ceiling because of his ability to be, dominant and identity shifting in terms of his style of play. And he's going to develop an offensive identity for his organization. And that's really big. Being a Chicago Bears fan, I'm sure you can attest this, man. It's David Montgomery did that this season with the Chicago Bears. He gave the Chicago Bears an identity because of his style of play. And everything fell off Montgomery on that playoff run, which didn't go very far. But man, I think Williams, in a sense, he's a better all-around back than given credit for. Good pass catcher, very willing in pass protection. Was a lead blocker for Michael Carter at some points in his career, and it was pretty fun to watch. But just needs to grow at the position. I mean, there's a guy who's probably the most raw out of a lot of these prospects we're going to talk about. That just needs time to grow, and an offensive coordinator who's going to be patient with him as well.
Do you think Seattle would be good for Williams? Because I feel like that would be great. Just let him pound it like 15, 20 times.
I don't think Russ would be very happy, but yeah, I think it would be. I don't know if they'll have the capital to be able to chase him. I think that he goes in the first. I think we see two backs in the first round. I think Harris and Williams both go in the first. I think Etienne is more of a luxury, quote unquote, and he goes more in the second. I think you can really form your offensive identity around Williams or Harris. Harris is more of that, overarching skill set. It's going to be, really diverse player, can use him in a variety of different ways, line him up everywhere. But Williams is going to be, we want to run the football. And Atlanta's my best fit for him. I could also see the Bucs being a phenomenal fit for Williams at the end of the first round. just because he provides something that, Fournette doesn't provide and Ronald Jones doesn't provide. And I think Tom Brady needs that type of player, especially around the goal line. And that's going to be a big thing in fantasy football is Williams going to have a 10 touchdown floor almost. Like that's going to be the floor of Devontae Williams, is because he is going to be a team's primary goal line back because of how good he is in short yard situations. So that's going to be a big boon to his stock. Is he is a phenomenal player on the goal line in short yardage. So I want to get on a team that can actually score. So Atlanta would be good, but I think, the Bucs is kind of the dream landing spot for Williams at the end of the first round.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, we saw the Chiefs after their Super Bowl run, that dream landing spot. We went to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If he did that same with the Bucs. Yeah. I was hoping it was DeAndre Swift going to the Chiefs is a different kind of scenario. But
for sure,
John, you've kind of really turned me on to Javonte Williams, and you've been talking about him for months here. Are there any other, I think they hit the nail on the head with him. I mean, he's going to be a fantastic player. Are there any other running backs that you got your eye on that we're really interested in on draft capital and want to check with an Angelo on any kind of other?
Yeah, there definitely are a few, and I'd love to get Angelo's take on some of these. What I like about Javonte Williams is he just looks like that guy that can really carry the load and the short yardage and for potentially even 3-down back. It looks like he can pass block. But I'm struggling to find other running backs that really look like that 3-down back in the NFL. So there's some guys that I've been studying, Chuba Hubbard, Michael Carter, Kenneth Gainwell. They all have different dynamics, but they look more like maybe you're going to be a pass catching type back or a 3rd-down back. I kind of like Trey Sermon, but I'm not 100% convinced on him yet either. What are your take on some of those guys? Is there someone that's kind of starting to creep up into that 4 spot for you?
Yeah, I mean, you said Sermon. That's it. I think Sermon's the one I think for me that has that 3-down upside.
Yeah.
The only thing that's, I guess, a red mark on his profile is durability. So,
right.
And, running back's not, like I said, man, it's a first contract position. You're fighting for that second contract. Like guys like Chris Carson are fighting for jobs right now, right? They're trying to find.
Yeah.
So I think Trey Sermon's in that same way. I think he's the most well put together back in this class in terms of the intuitive sense of understanding the position and playing the position well in terms of skill. Him and Michael Carter are very skilled football players, and I think they'll both find homes. Trey Sermon profiles to me as that 3-down back, and I think he's someone you can get pretty late in rookie drafts. I mean, where I'm at right now,
right,
mid-second,
mid to late second,
right?
Yeah,
that's huge.
I've been pulling the trigger a little bit in the late second with Trey Sermon, even one in the early 3rd. And if he somehow does get some draft capital or lands somewhere like Pittsburgh, maybe it's like, okay, now we might have something here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I like Gainwell too, not in that 3-down vein, but Gainwell's running backs are turning into more Austin Eckler than Derrick Henry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's what we're going to see more. And Gainwell's, him and Harris are the best receivers in this class, the position. So
no doubt.
I think for me, he's going to go to an offense that wants to utilize the running back as a big extension of the passing game. And that's going to be huge for his stock fantasy wise. I mean, he's going too low in draft right now. He's going in a early second round. I'm seeing a lot of. I would take him in late first. I would go as far to say if you want a more, I guess, a safer floor in fantasy, he's probably a little bit safer than ETN is, because ETN is going to need a specific landing spot, especially if you're drafting before the NFL draft. Gainwell's a little bit safer.
Nice.
But I think that's going to be interesting. I like Michael Carter a lot. Like I said, very skilled player. You can tell he's going to play a position at a high level in terms of skill. I don't know where he's probably going to be a secondary back in a committee, but more like a 1A, 1B type deal with him. I like see him in Philadelphia, honestly. I think, Miles Sanders needs someone to balance out his own skill set. I think we've kind of found out that Miles Sanders isn't a 3-down back, right? He is not a 18 touch per game guy. There are ability issues and obviously issues with, like ball security. Drops and fumbles have been huge with Sanders over, especially this past year, and coming out of college as well. And then I guess the other guys we were mentioning, Chuba Hubbard, he's going a lot later than he probably should. If we look at the shortcomings he had this past season, they are missing a lot of their offensive linemen. At one point, I think it was they were down 4. So that's not good. The high ankle sprain, and then the situation with Gundy. That was bad. I mean, the fact that he played that season because of that, I mean, I would have been, being a black dude in Chicago, man, I'd be out. Like, no chance I'm playing. But the fact that he played for his team and had that sense of pride to finish out his career was, that's commendable. And like, that's huge for him in terms of his stock. It took a hit.
Yeah, it did.
Because his stock took a pretty big hit. I think he was going to be a 2nd-round pick last year. Coming off a 2,000-yard season. Thankful that high ankle sprain wasn't as bad as, let's say a Bryce Love from a few years back, where Bryce Love was going to have 2nd-round draft capital. But then the torn ACL took him completely out of contention. But Chuba Hubbard's, like I said, man, he's a guy you can get later than you probably should. 2,000-yard back. I think he needs a specific scheme to succeed. Wide zone would like to see him in San Fran. If they can get him in the 3rd round or so, it'd be great. But there's quite a few backs that are really interesting in this class, but the only ones that really profile as 3-down guys, in my opinion, Harris, Williams, and then Trey Sermon.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Very helpful.
Love that. Let's transition over to the wide receiver position. I mean, we've had, Katie Flowers came on, Chad Parson, Matt Hicks. They all kind of debated a little bit between, Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith. I mean, they do things totally different. I mean, Jamar Chase, a lot more physical, Devontae Smith, a lot more, shifty at the line. Out of these 2 guys, you have a favorite, and break down their tape a little bit here and try to tell us some things you see.
Absolutely. I think for me, favorite in terms of watching play, I like to watch Smith play because he's a craftsman. It's when you like, he's an NFL cornerback's, a former pro's favorite player. That's who Devonta Smith is, because you have an appreciation for how he plays the game and the nuance and the craftsman-like approach he takes. I think Chase is a better prospect, but I think Smith's a better player. To me, Smith is the more polished, like I said, craftsman-like athlete. Chase is, you can see the potential, man. He physically dominates the game at times. And the one thing that's interesting to note is, like, look at how they handled press. I think we think of press as being a big strength thing. Chase struggled more against press than Smith did, and there's a big reason for that. Smith was a more proficient downfield threat because of his athletic capability, because of his speed. I mean, he's a 10.6, 700-meter guy, so he's not slow. Chase doesn't win like that. Chase is going to be, a contested catch monster. He profiles more of that quote-unquote alpha at X receiver. Winning back shoulders, winning down the field with his strength and physicality and size, similar to how Des Bryant won at Oklahoma State and when he was a Cowboy in Dallas. But for me, I like both these guys, but I have a soft spot in my heart for Devonta Smith because, man, we are in 2021 and a guy who is about 170 pounds soaking wet dominated defensive backs week in and week out. That's special, man. I mean, that doesn't happen. We're not in the 1960s. This is 2021, man. You have guys like DK Metcalf. You have guys like AJ Brown out there, Laviska Shenault Jr., who are, these are big human beings, man. Like these are some dudes. So to see a guy like that dominate on that level is special to watch, and it's just fun to see him grow into a player that defensive backs are scared of that dude. Like if you ask like former defensive backs, like former NFL defensive backs, who would be your toughest assignment in this class, and they wouldn't bat an eye. And I've asked, and Devonta Smith, no questions. Why? He's impossible to cover. One-on-one, can't cover. Well, I'm like, why can't you cover a guy? He's 170 pounds, man. Why can't you cover him? Because he's the best mover at the position. He has so much in his toolbox. He has so much he can throw at you. There's a reason why, we're talking like Derek Stingley Jr. wouldn't press him, like refused to press him, because you're gonna look up on the 6 points on the board, and that's how it works with a guy like Smith. Chase, different story. He's gonna bring it for 4 quarters. He's gonna get in your face. He loves to use his hands. He's a very raw receiver. I mean, he has that alpha skill set of being a true NFL wide receiver 1 in an offense, and I think he will be. But with time, I think we need to let Jamar Chase develop a little more. But I think Devonta Smith will have a little bit more of an impact early on there in his career.
Love that. You guys know how big I am on Jamar Chase, but I mean, for you two guys, we'll start with you, Mung. I mean, what do you see between the two, and which direction are you heading?
Yeah, and I'm a little biased, to be honest, because traditionally I do prefer, like those more alpha wide receivers, right? And that's Jamar Chase to me. And, at times he almost kind of reminds me of a running back, the way he gets like yards after the catch. He kind of goes through people a little bit too. And for me, that's what I love to watch. And he goes up and gets those contested catches. Not to get too sidetracked, but I think another guy who kind of reminds me of that late is Tylan Wallace. To me, he also
Tylan.
And I just love, kind of seeing him become a running back after the catch, basically. And, my only concern, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, and hopefully I am, because I wish Devonta Smith a ton of success. He's a special guy. He is, if I had to put money down, that outlier. But like you said, 170 pounds soaking wet, that does give me a little bit of pause. And I'm just a more slightly risk adverse dynasty GM. So for that reason, Chase is my wide receiver one over Smith.
I like that a lot. I think the one thing, so for me being like in the sport performance world, like I try to look at it from that perspective and try to get the perspective of who these guys were attached to at the collegiate level. So Devon Smith was attached to a guy named Dr. Matthew Rhea, okay, one of the smartest minds in sports performance. He's a guy that's world-renowned, did a lot of work with the Indiana's football team, but came to Alabama, I think, in March of 2020. So he got a chance to work with Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris, Mac Jones and company. And the one thing I'll always look at is how they try to transform these guys. These guys are sports scientists, man. These guys are the smartest guys in the world in terms of sport and human performance and getting the most out of these athletes, especially Dr. Rhea. Devonta Smith didn't gain a pound. Why? Like, why didn't Devonta Smith gain weight? Because Dr. Matthew Rhea is telling us that he doesn't need to gain weight, right? He doesn't need to be 185 pounds to be at peak performance. And I think that's the one thing that's the toughest to realize too sometimes is everybody in terms of being an athlete has a different, peak performance weight and size. And, we can say BMI and frame. But Dr. Matthew Rhea is kind of telling the world that if Devonta Smith doesn't weigh 192 pounds at his pro day, he probably doesn't need to weigh 192 pounds to play professional football at a high level, because we're seeing more guys like that in the NFL, like Stephon Diggs. Chad Johnson was kind of the most recent one. Chad played at 170 pounds. Like Chad wasn't a big dude. He even on the I Am Athlete podcast, he was saying I played like right around 170. Antonio Brown, like I said, Diggs, and there's a lot of these guys who play at slighter weights, but those guys are also more difficult to cover because of it. These guys are extremely quick, and they understand the game of football. That's the one thing that you can kind of look at. The smaller guys have to have an advantage somewhere that's not physical. And it's the ability to understand the game and, to have that high level of intellect. Like Antonio Brown, there's no way a dude who's 5'10", 175 pounds should be dominating the game like he did when he was at his peak. When you have guys running around looking like Calvin Johnson, and we're seeing, guys like Antonio Brown, having a very similar level of dominance. And it's because of the high level of intellect they display in the field of play, their intuitive nature, and that type of thing. So for me, I'm a risk averse dynasty player too, but I'm not worried at all about, the BMI concerns and the size and frame, because the smartest guys in the world are telling us it's not a problem. And so for me, I'm like, oh, well, it's cool with me. I mean, and he plays well at that weight. So why would you change that? Because his decelerative qualities are probably his best quality, especially if you watch him on comeback routes and you watch him come back to the football, and he's creating 5 yards of separation on a comeback. And it's just ridiculous to watch. But man, I mean, I'm excited to watch him, but I understand why people were pausing. I'm not up in arms about it, but I think providing context as to what we should actually look for in players gaining and losing weight and what that does to their movement qualities. Like ETN showed up at 215 in his pro day. He's not playing at 215.
He ain't going to be at 215.
He's going to play. He played his best ball around 199 to 203. So he'll probably play around that. But, some NFL GMs are a little bit more in the Stone Age in terms of, that type of thing. They like to see that. They like it simple. 215 means more durable. 203 means less durable. But in reality, does it really mean more or less durable? No.
So sticking at Alabama, I mean, the one thing I'm a little less risk averse as well. Breakout age is a big thing to me. And we know
Sure.
Devontae Smith's breakout age was a little bit later. And I think some of that had to do with how fantastic Jalen Waddle was, and now he got that opportunity to be that guy. So talk to me, a little bit about what you saw from Jalen Waddle. And I feel like he's going a little bit too late in drafts because this is another phenomenal talent.
No, he is, man. He's fun to watch. And man, you can probably attest to this, man. He's the best returner we've seen since Devin Hester being, a Chicago guy. He is a top shelf mover in terms of his combination of quickness and efficiency. I mean, he's an absolute stud with the ball in his hands. But the question that, for me being like the risk averse dynasty, like a dynasty manager, like, will he see a significant target share? He had one career game over 6 receptions in college. I think he hasn't had a game in college over 150 yards. For reference, Devonta Smith had 7 games of 150 or more yards in 1 year in 2020. So are we getting a guy who's going to get the volume to be consistently productive? For me, if we're talking about, well, who is he compared to in terms of potential skill set and also what might his statistical output look like? Deshaun Jackson. That's kind of where I got Jalen Waddle right now is Deshaun Jackson. The booms are going to be huge. I mean, we're talking 6 for 215 and 3 tutties boom. But he might drop a 1 catch on 3 targets for 22 yards. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think when you watch Jalen Waddle play, he just pops, right? I mean, his accelerative qualities, his top end speed, the way he moves in the field, he has just this aura about him. But is he going to be the alpha of an offense? If you watch Alabama play, you can clearly see that Devonta Smith was the focal point. If you watch how they won, and Devonta Smith's winning against the best corner, and he's in man coverage. Jalen Waddle's playing a lot of his reps in the slot, which is great for him. He should running a lot of crossers, digs. A lot of stuff down the field in the third level. And that's where he's going to win in the NFL is he's going to be a threat in the third level of the field. Truly, like people say, take the top off of defense, be that threat and provide that. So I think for me, he's going to be a really, really high level NFL player, but we might be a little disappointed at times in terms of fantasy output.
I got you. I saw your eyes light up when Mung mentioned Tylan Wallace, and I know
Tylan.
You got excited. We all have that guy most of the time on the podcast. If they start talking about AJ Brown, I light up. You know what I mean? But you had that going with Tylan Wallace. So talk to me why.
Yeah, it's just like you watch the dude play. I mean, it's just the inner athleticism, man, the ability to contort and come down with these balls that he should not come down with at his size. He's really good after the catch. He needs to clean up some stuff for line of scrimmage, but I mean, if he stays healthy, I think I have him in that same tier with Waddle, with Marshall, with Moore, with Bateman. Like that's kind of the group I have him in on AGS, and I think it's valid. I think he could be a Pro Bowl caliber NFL player that you can get in the 3rd round of your rookie drafts. And for me, I'm just extremely excited to see where he can go, where he can grow. But the thing that I think is going to be tough is the durability. I think his brother actually had like 2 or 3 ACL injuries himself. Yeah. And thinking from like a hereditary nature, that's not a great sign when you've had one yourself, right? And he had one in 2019, bounced back from it, ran well at his pro day. We take it with a grain of salt, but I mean, 4.39 hand timed, you can add whatever you want to it. 4.39 is not slow. It could be 4.5, still fast. You know what I mean? Like that tells me I'm not looking at it from a fast, slow standpoint. I'm looking at it from, are you, well enough, along and far enough along in your training to do that after the ACL injury, and he showed that he is, and he played well, this past year. So I just like him, man. He's a fun player to watch. I just you kind of get that sense with some players like that, like I don't know what it is, but like some pops in your head, like, man, this guy can ball, right? Like, and that's kind of what I have with him. But I think he's gonna be a pretty damn good pro. So I'm excited to watch him and see him grow.
John, I saw that you kind of lit up there a little bit. There's a couple guys in that brain.
Well, it's really good to get some reassurance from our man Angelo here, because I actually put a thread out there on Twitter recently and was talking about Tylan Wallace is just not getting enough love right now. He's really slipping, and I can't really figure it out. I think it really is. It's got to be the injury history, and it's just the recency bias, out of sight, out of mind. I got to watch a lot of his games. I watched a lot of Big 12, and I mean, you remember the hype that was coming after this guy not that long ago after his sophomore year? It was like 1,500 yards, Bolitnikoff Award finalist, and he was everybody was talking about him. And so, look, I get it, but I mean, this guy, he's like, what is he? He's like 6 foot 195, and I believe he ran like a 4.45 at Oklahoma State. He's explosive on film, vertical threat, good hands, attacks the ball. But he's one of those contested catch guys too. I've seen him do it. And so for me, he should be a little bit higher on a lot of these rankings that are out there right now. But I'm cool with getting him late second, early third.
Yeah, man, I've seen
every
him fall,
time.
Yeah, I've seen him fall to 304.
Come on,
it's tough. And last year for me, it was like Laviska Shenault Jr. Man, you saw. I mean, if you watched Colorado, watch him play. Man, Laviska's a dog. Like,
oh yeah,
like there's something different about that cat. So when you watch that, like, you can't get that out of your head. And so the question is, like, am I gonna, take the, at that cost? Is it worth it? And it absolutely is. Shenault now is arguably a top 24 dynasty wide receiver. So if he stays healthy, he's going to be an absolute monster. But same thing with Tylan. If he stays healthy, he gets with a good offense, with a good ecosystem, an organization, man, he's gonna thrive, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, here's my thing. Rookie drafts. You're in the late second, you're in the third round. What are you looking for? Looking for those upside, high ceiling players. Tylan Wallace.
All day.
Exactly. That's not the time you're trying to find role players. That's where you're trying to take that upside. That's where you win your rookie drafts. You take that all the time. Two guys that are home runs that a lot of Twitter's kind of polarizing here a little bit. Talk a little bit about Rondale Moore and Rashad Bateman. Those will be the last two guys we talk about. And then hopefully we have enough time to do a quick, like, one round, since we haven't talked quarterbacks, a one quarterback league mock real quick.
That sounds good, man. Rondale Moore gets tricky because of role. Like, where is he going to play? What's going to be his primary responsibility? But he's a fantastic player to watch, right? I mean, where's he going to line up? Like, as an offense, going to use him creatively. But he's an extension of the run game. I mean, if you watch him play, man, I mean, his ADOT wasn't very high, but he's going to be a yards after catch threat. And kind of going back to Laviska Shenault, he's baby Shenault in terms of role, how he plays, how he attacks the game. But that's kind of how I like him a lot. But it's going to be, is he going to be stuck with a offensive coordinator who's not going to utilize his skill set? And he's going to be kind of in that Golden Tate-ish role that we saw at Golden Tate's height of his career when he was pretty productive. And that's going to be kind of where he sits. Like, he's not a true 3-level threat. He's not going to dominate the 3rd level of a defense or the 2nd level. He's going to win around the line of scrimmage, but he's going to win and win consistently. And that's the big thing with him. He's going to, be a slot option primarily. He's going to, orbit motion, bubbles, jet motion. That's going to be his thing and be a weapon for an offense. But the question really is, how productive is he going to be for fantasy? Like, role-wise, I would love for him to be like in a Robert Woods type role where he's doing the jet motions, but he's also playing at all 3 levels of the field, as he gets more comfortable and grows into his NFL role. I would love that for him. Rashad Bateman's an interesting one because everybody's really high on Bateman. I like Bateman a lot, but I think he is going to be a good NFL wide receiver. And that's okay. Not everybody's going to be, like freaking AJ Brown. Like, it's not going to work like that. But I think he's safe. I think he's the 2nd safest receiver in terms of early career output. I think him and Devonta Smith are the two I think they're going to produce right away for an NFL offense, depending on where they land. But Bateman's interesting because he can win at all three levels, but I think he is best in the second level of a defense, right? Using his frame and using his ability to get, to be very intuitive in a sense to come out of his breaks at the second level in terms of timing, using his frame to eliminate contest on those contested catches is huge for me. So I like him a lot. I mean, he's just a guy that I don't think he has a massive ceiling, but he has a pretty safe floor. He's actually one of the guys I would like the Bears to take at 20 if he's there. I wouldn't mind that at all. I think we need another outside threat. Anthony Miller's he's not it anymore, right? He plays in the slot and he's probably going to be traded. I love Darnell Mooney, but would love to get Darnell Mooney in the slot. But love that mismatch because of how well he plays in space and how well he does down the field as well. So I mean, for me, I like Bateman. I like a lot of these guys, man. There's not a lot of prospects in this year's class I just don't like, especially out of this crop of like 6, 7, 8 wide receivers. There's a lot of guys who are really good. I think Terrace Marshall's another one that I think really highly of. I think he's oozing with upside. But there's a lot of dudes who can play.
Hey, Ange, quick question for you. I know it's hard to comp players 1-to-1, but so I'm admittedly down on Rondale Moore. Sure. I comped him to Tavon Austin a little bit, and then I comped Bateman a little bit in my notes to Adam Thielen. What are your thoughts on those?
Interesting. Rondale Moore to me, Tavon Austin was a little bit quicker than Moore. Moore's quick, very quick, but Moore wins with his frame a bit too. He's strong player, makes you feel his presence too. It's tough because I don't do a ton of comps because Austin was criminally underutilized. And if Austin would be in the NFL today, it'd be different than when he was in his prime and when he got drafted. The NFL is more equipped to use a guy like Moore now than they were when Austin got drafted. To me, if I'm playing a comp, it's like I said, baby Chenault. I think that's kind of the big thing for me is I think he plays like LaVisca in terms of how physical he is. But obviously it's in a much smaller package than the 230-pound Chenault. So I think that's a good comp. I mean, Austin was a dynamic player, and the thing is they're going to play a similar role. But the difference is now the NFL is more equipped to deal with the role that Austin played back then. And then you said Adam Thielen for Rashad Bateman. Man, I love Adam Thielen. To me, my Adam Thielen stylistic comparison last year was CeeDee Lamb. I think the vertical presence, the accelerative capabilities too. Thielen's a fast dude too. People don't understand that, man. Thielen's a 4.4 dude. I mean, he's not slow. I don't know if Bateman has his accelerative qualities that Thielen has, but the way they can win in the air, I can definitely see that being, pretty viable.
So I love listening to you talk about prospects and the different ways you do it. And I wish we could really dive into it. I wanted to keep everything to an hour for your time and everything like that. But what our listeners always want to hear at the end of the episodes is a mock draft. We all love to do it, and it changes. We started this in January with Matthew Hicks, and now all of a sudden, we're midway through March, and we're starting to get towards the time where our dynasty owners, they want to start figuring out their own plans and start getting some ideas. So let's put together a little 12-person, mock draft. We'll do one quarterback, and nothing flashy. This is more like our vanilla one. Since I'm sitting in the host chair, I'll go first to make it easy. And then we'll go Angelo, Mung, and then John, and then we'll do it snake style. So we'll bring it back. Sound good?
Sure. Yeah, man, that sounds good to me.
I'm cheating a little bit, but Najee Harris is my 101. I debated him and one of the wide receivers here, but I feel like slam dunk prospect is going to go really high as far as the running back goes. So I have no problem taking Najee Harris at 101. Angelo?
Man, Kyle Pitts at 2. For me, anytime you can get a Hall of Fame caliber prospect, you take him. I mean, if you can. I would take Harris over Pitts because I think Harris is super safe, and you might get 5, 6, 7, 8 RB2 plus years out of Harris, which is huge. Obviously, tight end's not a need, but if you're talking about, let's say, Travis Kelce, where would you take Travis Kelce? right? Pretty high if you're talking about this class of players. So for me, I think he has that type of upside in terms of the impact he's going to have on the position. I think he's honestly the best receiver in this class. When you look at the overarching skill sets that he has in the, combined with, he's a good blocker, but him versus Chase versus Smith versus the rest of the class, it's like man, guys who are 6'6", 245 shouldn't move like that. Like he's a unicorn in that regard, and he's a special talent. I don't like saying that a lot, but I think he's a gold jacket Hall of Fame type dude.
Yeah, and I believe in your analysis on your website, you're dominant. You have him projected as such, correct?
Yeah, I do, and it's one of those that like when I grade it out as such on AGS with the compilation of film and data, not many of those happen. I think there was none in the 2019 class. There was one last year, and that was JT. But this year at like running back and receiver, it's Kyle Pitts.
I love that, and I'm the kind of guy who like waits on my tight ends and tries to
same here. Yeah.
Struggle, but that's great. No, I know both these guys were talking about Kyle Pitts, and we wanted to see where you had him and we didn't bring him up, so I'm so glad you took him there. Mung, you're up.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy call for me. I'll take Jamar Chase here. Even if he needs a little bit of time to really develop, I think he has the tools as is to already produce a little bit as a rookie, and the sky's the limit for him.
All right, Bobby O'Shea. It seems like whenever we do these mocks, you end up being the snake guy. So you get to double
tap it.
Double tap.
I did want to give some credit. Everyone go check out the Why Kyle Pitts thread that Angelo put out there. And to my credit, Angelo, I took Kyle Pitts in our last mock, and I got him at 106. It was super flex,
nice.
but I love him as well. And so it was nice to see him that high. So, all right, I'm going to double tap here. I'm going to go Travis Etienne, and then I'm going to come back with Devonta Smith as my two.
That's a nice little pick there. Mung?
Yeah, I do have Javonte Williams, I think slightly over Etienne in my rankings, so I will take Williams here. I do think that he can be more of a true 3-down back than Etienne, maybe even.
I like that.
You are up, Angelo.
Man, I'm gonna go kind of for the home run a bit at the wide receiver position. I'm gonna take Terrace Marshall.
Okay.
Nice.
I get a double tap here, and these are more kind of like guys that I've been falling in love with, and they're more my style. But I'm actually going to take Jalen Waddle, and I'm going to go back on this because of some of the way you Waddle and Rondale Moore here.
Love it.
And I know I'm going to look into it a little bit further. Role's going to be a big thing with them. Landing spot's going to be huge, but they definitely have that upside.
Awesome, man. Then I'm back up, correct?
You are up.
Awesome. I'll take Kenneth Gainwell. I think with his pass catching upside and how he can be used in terms of versatility, that's going to be huge at the NFL level. So I'm hoping he gets with a creative offensive mind so they can use him correctly.
Got to get them gains. Mung, what's up, buddy?
Yeah, even in one quarterback, I think we've gotten far enough where I'm taking Trevor Lawrence here. He's just such a safe floor prospect. We know he's going to get some rushing production in Urban Meyer's offense. And, he's a phenomenal passer and basically in a whole package. So give me Lawrence.
All right. I, in this position, would be thrilled to get Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, I was going to say.
At this point in the draft. So I'm feeling good about that one, Mike.
That sounds fantastic. Angelo, I got to thank you so much. And it's been great diving into your mind. I mean, you think about things so much, it's top-notch analysis, and you think about it from a different, vantage point. And I absolutely love that. You appreciate the time coming on here. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, what you have working on, and, continue. If you guys haven't checked out his website, I mean, it is fantastic. It is in-depth. It breaks it down completely, shows you, he has GIFs on there that just break down everything. He has all the videos. It's a fantastic product, man. I love it.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you guys having me on. Apologies again for being a little bit late and running a little behind, but thank you guys again. I truly appreciate it. You guys can all find me on angelanalysis.com first and foremost. That's where a lot of my work is being put nowadays. I can only put so much on Twitter. It's to see like with the characters and everything, man. Because sometimes, my wife can tell you I'll ramble about prospects, so I can actually ramble on my website, which is nice.
I love that. When you were on Twitter, your threads are straight fire, and I'm like, okay, he's just going to have the same thread on the website. And I'm like, no, man, so much more.
Thank you.
It's so in depth.
Oh man, I appreciate that, man. And you can follow me on Twitter, man, at Angelo_fantasy. My DMs are always open, so if anyone wants to chop it up, ask questions about prospects, I answer everything. So, but thank you guys again, man. I had a ton of fun. Thanks.
And Mung, what's going on with you?
Yeah, like I said, I finally had time to start looking into this rookie class, so my rankings are taking shape. Those will be out on Fantrax pretty soon. I really wish I had, Angelo just as like Siri or Alexa. I could ask him about stuff all day.
Dude, that's nice.
I mean, I would have loved to talk about Diami Brown or Pat Fryermuth. Those two guys I love a lot. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter at FFA_Mung. That's MENG.
And we'll have to see if we can get that app in the works. You know what I mean? Ask Angelo.
Oh, God. Hey, it's got a nice ring to it, though, right?
It does have a ring to it.
I mean, you got to toss me that business plan, homie. I mean, because we got to get that cracking, but I like
trademark that.
I know, right? That's funny.
And last but not least, my brother in green, St. Patty's Day. Let's roll it out.
Closing out St. Patty's strong here on the Smash Accept pod. Loved it. Angelo, loved every minute of it. Really appreciate all that advice. I'm going to follow it closely. When he puts the thread out, I'm like, all right, everything else is going to just have to hold on for a second. I'm going to go through this.
I know you put the kids to bed sometimes at 6:30. I know about it. Dinner's over and he puts a new thread out like, kids, going to sleep. Let's go.
That's right. No, but for me, I'm going to stay really active. I'm here for the community, want to help you guys out with your trades, with your rookie drafts, and just mixing it up with you guys. So reach out anytime. I'm going to be putting more threads out, especially on the rookie class as well, like I have been, especially when I start seeing those values, like we talked about tonight with Tylan Wallace, Trey Sermon, Pat Fryermuth, a couple of guys that I've been looking at super values right now. So we'll see more of that. But anyway, thanks again, Mike.
And thanks again for tuning in. Like I said, from January up until this week, we've been hitting rookies hard and fantastic people like Angelo. Next week, we got Ryan McDowell. So we're going to hit a little bit more free agents and talk about, dynasty startups because we're getting into that type of season.
Godfather.
Exactly. Exciting stuff at Smash Accept. So thanks again for tuning in and enjoy the process.